Week 3 begins with a Thursday night AFC East showdown between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. Josh Allen and the Bills have won their last 5 matchups against the Dolphins. The last time the Dolphins beat the Bills at home was 2016. Neither Sean McDermott or Josh Allen have ever lost to the Dolphins at home. Will the Dolphins finally snap the streak and snag a win up north, or will the Bills continue to defend their turf? We'll see in the simulation. But first, let's get behind the bar and make our drink a booze cruiser. Bills fans, welcome back. Dolphins fans, welcome to your first of 5 primetime games this season. Now, despite my earlier angst about coming up with enough drinks to cover all of Buffalo's primetime games, I have actually managed to come up with enough to cover all of them, though I will admit, on some of these episodes, I am really going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of Buffalo drink ideas. Miami, on the other hand, has been an absolute joy to come up with drinks for because there are so many drinks that are either invented in or have really strong ties to South Florida. I say South Florida and not Miami specifically because a couple of their drinks have really strong connections to the Florida Keys, including this week's representative, the Rum Runner. All right, the Rum Runner. Always love it when I have to buy 2 brand new bottles for an episode. I mean, hell, 3 if you count Buffalo's addition to this. But I guess that's what you sign up for when you decide to make a tiki drink, especially a tiki drink whose origin story is that it was created as a way of using up random old bottles that were lying on hand and needed to get rid of. As far as cocktail origin stories goes, the Rum Runner seems to be pretty well supported, though things do get a little bit fuzzy when you start digging into the details. The generally agreed upon facts is that the drink was invented at the Holiday Isle Tiki Bar in the Florida Keys by bartender John Elber, but nailing down the specific date is a bit hard. Most sources I've seen say early 1970s. One was as specific as to say 1972. However, the new owners of the resort where that tiki bar was located claimed that it was invented in 1969, and there's a whole bunch of other less reputable sources that say the 1950s. Those seem to be completely off base. It seems like sometime in the 69 to 72 window is most probable for when this drink was first created. Adding an additional wrench into the story, there is another post-Prohibition cocktail invented in 1937 that's called the Rum Runner. However, that drink seems to really basically just be a daiquiri with pineapple juice added into it. So there's not really much overlap in terms of the actual spec behind it. It seems to just be, a common name that was used for these sorts of drinks. This drink is obviously named after those who were smuggling alcohol into the US during Prohibition, specifically those who were bringing rum from the Caribbean into Florida and other ports along the US South. The size and scale of these operations varied pretty greatly, with some vessels like the Rio 2 or the Malahat being, 100, 250 foot long supply ships, all the way down to sort of, 20-foot skiffs and speedboats. Typically, the way this worked was those larger vessels would moor themselves, 3 to 12 miles off the coast so that they were outside the range of US jurisdiction, and then the smaller vessels would make the journey out, gather, booze, and then sort of sprint it back to shore because they were harder to detect and catch by these Coast Guard vessels that were out hunting for smugglers. However, the Caribbean was not the only place that rum running was occurring during Prohibition, which brings us back up north to Buffalo. Now, I did warn you I was scraping the bottom of the barrel with some of the Buffalo drinks, and this week is one of those because Buffalo's representative is indeed Buffalo Trace.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Indeed, Buffalo Trace. It's not from Buffalo, it's from Kentucky. However, it does have Buffalo in the name, and it feels fitting to use a whiskey in this one, considering how much whiskey flowed across the Canadian border into Buffalo during Prohibition. There was actually an additional Buffalo modification that I wanted to make to this drink, but sadly was not able to due to procurement issues, and that is Loganberries. So the Rum Runner calls for Blackberry Liqueur, and Loganberries are actually a cross between the North American blackberry and the European raspberry. Now, Loganberries originated in Santa Cruz, but they really caught on in Buffalo as a beverage flavoring, with Loganberry soda actually outselling Coke in the region once. And after a little bit more digging, I found that there are distilleries that make Loganberry liqueur. sadly, it was not available in any of the stores around me, and it would have cost way too much and taken too long to get it shipped here. So sadly for this drink, we are going to be stuck with plain old-fashioned Blackberry Liqueur. All right, so as a result, our booze cruiser is going to be basically a rum runner where we've substituted the rum for bourbon. However, I have tweaked the spec a little bit to put more emphasis on the bourbon and also account for the fact that the Overproof Rum that I'm using is stronger than the Navy strength rum that the recipe originally calls for. So I've got my rocks glass full of crushed ice here, and we are going to start off in our shaker, adding our ice cube, and then adding 1.5 ounces of our Buffalo Trace bourbon. Obviously, if you're making this at home, you can use whatever bourbon, but for the sake of this being a drink mashup, got to keep the Buffalo in the name. All right, then we are going to do a 1/2 ounce of our OFTD rum. This is lovely. You saw it during the Texans episode when I made a rummarita with this that was shockingly somehow really good. Still really can't get over how damn good that drink was. Next, we are doing 1 ounce of banana liqueur. This is where you start realizing that this drink was honestly probably created just to move some product that was lying around, because this is, I think, the first and only drink I've made that's called for banana liqueur. And whoo boy, that smells, oh my god, that smells exactly like a banana Laffy Taffy. That is 1000% what that scent is. Next up, we are doing 1 ounce of blackberry liqueur. Like I said, I would have loved to have gotten some loganberry liqueur. I think that would have been so good, but instead, we will just have to settle for blackberry, sadly. Okay, that actually, yeah, that smells like blackberry. It smells nice. Next up, 2 ounces of pineapple juice. This is one of the ones that I think is almost always just gotten in a can. I don't think I've ever seen someone like outside of the Caribbean, you know, like make their own pineapple juice. But hefty 2 ounces there. Hoping I left enough room in my glass now. I might actually need a bigger glass. Next, 1 ounce of lime juice. Refilled my bottle. Got whole bottle full of fresh lime juice now. Add some more acidity to this drink. And then finally, 1/2 ounce of Grenadine. This drink is almost certainly calling for, you know, classic Rose's Red 40 Grenadine. If you have nice Grenadine on hand, feel free to use it, but I highly doubt that that was what was being called for when this drink was being created in the 70s. All right. Now we're gonna shake all of that up. All right. We are going to strain that into our glass and pray that we have left enough room. All right. Yeah, I would definitely recommend using a bigger glass than I did, because I still have a bit of this drink left in the shaker. But we are going to add a little straw to it. And then if you had, honestly, yeah, so definitely would recommend doing this in more of like a hurricane glass, something that's got more volume for the drink to sit in. And then if you want to get fancy, you can garnish that with a Pineapple Wedge and a Maraschino cherry. But let's give it a taste. Oh, that is not for me. That is, I could see somebody enjoying this drink. Let me see, what if I just sort of give it a sip without the straw? What if we go in this way? No, there's too much crushed ice. You need the straw. Oh, it is, I mean, it tastes like you dumped all of the sweet shit that you just had lying on hand into a drink. It is super cloying, super sugary. You can feel it all just sort of like sticking and coating the inside of your mouth. Yeah, the 1.5 ounces of bourbon does not come through at all. Hell, this Overproof Rum, which is like spiced and punchy, does not come through at all. I guess if this was a better drink, I'd say that it's, dangerous, because you'll drink so much of it and you won't even realize, how much you're drinking. But I feel every sip. I feel the diabetes coming on with every sip of this drink that I take. If you're someone who's got like a massive sweet tooth and loves artificial flavors, then maybe this is the drink for you. But personally, yeah, this is kind of like the antithesis of everything I like in a drink. There's the smallest little bit of evolution in there, in the sense that like it's almost kind of like a roulette wheel of like which flavor am I going to get, right? Like, am I getting pineapple on this sip? Am I getting banana? Am I getting blackberry? Am I getting, the sweetness from the grenadine? But it's not, they don't play off each other. There's no sort of like evolution, dynamic to it. It's just like, spin the taste buds wheel and see which flavor is going to stick on this sip. And it's drinkable in the sense that, yeah, you're not getting hit with that, that bite of the alcohol every time you take a sip, but instead you're just sort of getting like smothered with this sugary blanket. But hey, a drink's a drink, and now that we've made it, let's get into the simulation. All right, first game of week 3. Bills get the ball first, and I bet Miami is glad that they're playing this game in Buffalo in September instead of in the winter. Bills' offense is forced to punt on their opening drive, and on the Dolphins' opening possession, Tua steps up in the pocket and absolutely unloads this one, launching it 51 yards downfield to who else but Tyreek Hill, who still has that juice according to Madden. On third down, this fade lofted into the back of the end zone is broken up, but the Dolphins get on the board first with a field goal. It was honestly a pretty quiet first quarter for both of these teams, but halfway through the second, Buffalo schemes up this play-action bootleg, with Allen rolling out and finding Dawson Knox for an 18-yard touchdown, putting Buffalo up 7-3. The Dolphins answer right back on their ensuing possession, with this perfectly placed ball finding Tyreek again for a 25-yard touchdown, which puts them up 10-7 at the half. Dolphins get the ball first in the second half and make it all the way down to the Bills' 10-yard line, but a big 8-yard sack on third down holds them to a field goal, keeping this a one-score game. On Buffalo's very next drive, they find that one score as Allen finds Elijah Moore amidst the Dolphins' defense for a 15-yard touchdown, retaking the lead. However, in the second half, these defenses just could not get a proper stop, and on the very first play of the fourth quarter, no amount of brain damage is going to keep Tua from keeping this ball and running it in for a 12-yard rushing TD. On the 2-point conversion, Darren Waller comes in motion and is wide open on the out route, putting the Dolphins up a clean 7. The Bills' next drive ate a lot of clock, but they eventually made it all the way down to the Dolphins' 3-yard line. Miami's defense gets a big stop on third down, with a 6-yard sack making this a must-have 4th and 8 for Buffalo. However, everybody should know by now that no distance is safe in terms of keeping Josh Allen away from the end zone, as he sneaks up through the pocket and sprints this in for the game-tying TD. With 2 minutes left and 3 timeouts though, the Dolphins have more than enough time to make it to the edge of field goal range, where this huge 31-yard completion to Tyreek Hill sets them up for the game-winning chip shot field goal with 9 seconds left on the clock. Miami gets their first win at Buffalo in nearly a decade, snapping their 5-game losing streak with a 24-21 victory. Now, one thing I feel confident saying at week 3 in the Sips and Simulation season is that Madden does not like the Bills, and I think a lot of this is due to how the Bills are built. Despite having the 4th highest overall team rating, they only have 2 players rated above 90 overall, whereas the other top 5 teams all have at least 5 players rated 90 or higher. The Bills are a team built on depth and being greater than the sum of their parts, and I think we're seeing Madden fail to model that emergent behavior in their 0-3 start to the season. As a point of comparison, using ESPN Analytics matchup predictor, the odds of the Bills being winless after week 3 is 4.8%. Ultimately though, only time will tell if this is a true shortcoming of Madden as a simulation platform, or if it's just an unlikely series of results. Honestly, I think these might be some of the most dead average, on-the-money passing predictions we've seen. Tua averaged 260 passing yards and just over 1 touchdown per game last season. while Josh averaged 220 yards and just over 1.5 touchdowns per game. The most unrealistic part might be neither of them having any interceptions, but to be fair, they both did a really solid job taking care of the football last season. I think a big part of why these QB stat projections are so in line with expectations is because the overall score for this game is roughly in line with current projections. There were no runs crazy enough to make the highlights, but Achane was powering the Dolphins' offense. 10 carries for 82 yards is a really solid game and incredible efficiency. On the other end of things, James Cook had a rough day at work, 27 yards on 11 carries. Now, normally when a running back has a performance this poor, I'm like, oh, classic Madden running back slander, but this is actually pretty common for Cook. He's a real boom or bust running back. The last season regular game in 2024 against the Patriots, he went for 28 yards on 10 carries. Similar story with Josh Allen, honestly, as well. He averages about 30 yards per game last season, but there's a lot of volatility there, so 42 yards is well within reason. Now, Tua's numbers are pretty obviously inflated. In the past 2 seasons, he hasn't rushed for more than 20 yards in a game, but 41 yards is far from the craziest numbers we've seen Madden put up for quarterback rushing yards. Over at the receiving stats, we have Tyreek Hill, and then everybody else. Now, because Tyreek is Tyreek, 167 receiving yards is not outside the realm of possibility. In 2023, he had 2 games with more than 167 receiving yards, and 5 with at least 150 receiving yards. However, last season, he didn't have a single game above 150 receiving yards, and only had 2 games over 100 receiving yards. So this is certainly an optimistic projection of his performance this season. Other than that, everybody else's stats just kind of blend together into a big pile of mid. If we go lower on the stat sheet, we see that Achane only had a single reception, which is actually pretty rare for him. Obviously, Mike McDaniel loves to scheme up screens and unorthodox ways to get the ball to his playmakers, so Achane usually has more receptions. Besides that, really the only notable thing about this stat sheet is who isn't on it. Keon fucking Coleman. I mean, goddamn, one of the Bills' leading receivers and not even so much as a target? Crazy work. With the Monte Carlo stats, we see the standard deflated quarterback passing stats. We can also see that James Cook on average has much better games than he had in the Madden simulation. Obviously, Tyreek's Madden performance is not something that we expect to happen on average, and oh, will you look at that? It's Keon Coleman over on the Bills side of the stat sheet. Sure, he's only averaging 3.5 receptions for 26 yards, but that's mathematically infinitely better than 0 targets. Finally, the most common Monte Carlo score for this matchup is a 21-14 Buffalo victory, with this matchup overall trending towards a shootout. Of course, a shootout by Monte Carlo standards is far from what we would generally consider a shootout, which is reflected in the average of all 10,000 simulated games, a 19-17 Bills victory. Do you agree with the simulations, or do you envision a different future? I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. As a reminder, our drink for this matchup is the Booze Cruiser, sickly sweet on initial sip, but enjoyable if you let it mellow and dilute a bit. If you decide to make it, please let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear your suggestions for what drink should be your team's representative. Stay curious, stay thirsty, and I'll see you in the next one.